Your Fitness Business Podcast Snapshot. Who are the All Blacks? The mantras that made the All Blacks, and which mantra is the author's favorite? All of that and more coming up in today's episode. Thank you for listening to the fitness industry's leading fitness business podcast for owners and managers. The Fitness Business Podcast is designed to provide a weekly educational platform for our listeners. The international variety of industry experts are here to share their advice, knowledge, and wisdom with you, our FBP family. Welcome back, FBP fam. I am excited to introduce this week's guest, author James Kerr. James has written the highly successful book entitled Legacy: What the All Blacks Can Teach Us About the Business of Life. Have you heard it? If not, this is the perfect episode for you to sit back and listen to this amazing story that goes deep into the heart of the world's most successful team, the New Zealand All Blacks. I'm your host, Dory Nugent, and you are listening to episode number 369. But before we get started, I just want to take a second to recognize our podcast partners, MyZone, One Fit Stop, Discover Strength, and Tribe Team Training. We love our sponsors and we appreciate their support all throughout the year. Author of the book Legacy is our special guest today. So please welcome James Kerr to the Fitness Business Podcast. James, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Oh, absolutely. Such a pleasure to have you on one of our episodes. Our loyal listeners have been asking, they always like to give us recommendations of guests, and your name has popped up many times, especially from our previous guests, as when I ask in the quick fire 5 question, what is one book that you could recommend? I hear Legacy as a repetitive book. So thank you for taking time to come on and talk to all of our listeners out there. We really appreciate it.
Listen, it's a genuine pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So I have to admit, being in the US, I'm not quite as familiar with rugby, nor was I familiar with the All Blacks. So when I listened to the book, I'm an audio book gal, I learned a lot just about rugby and the All Blacks, and it was very informative to me. So I would like to kind of just start, since our listeners are from all over the world, if you could just kind of first explain what rugby is to our FBP family.
Wow. So rugby is much like American football, but the players don't wear helmets, they don't wear pads, and the whole team play the whole game from beginning to end. There's no offensive or defensive structures, but otherwise it's roughly the same. The objective is to transport a ball from one end of the field up to the other and to cross what in rugby is called a try line or a touchdown. It's a 15-person game played by men and women internationally as well as locally, largely for members of the British Commonwealth and former British Commonwealth. But it's played passionately all around the world.
I like that word, passionately.
Passionately, very passionately.
I think a lot of our listeners can understand that word. So you write a book about a rugby team, okay, first of all, and then you decide to write about the All Blacks. Why? Could you tell our listeners why that is?
I think on a couple of levels. One, it's personal. I'm a New Zealander. I'm from Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, and rugby is the national religion, the national sport, the national preoccupation, the national obsession. So having an opportunity to do a book about the All Blacks is a sort of fulfillment in in many ways of a childhood dream. It's like being a supporter of, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers and having an opportunity to work with them. But maybe more specifically as a case study, it's because they are almost inarguably the most successful sporting unit of all time. They've got this extraordinary record. It's something like 78% of all encounters over 125 years. They've won 3 World Cups. They've been ranked world number 1 for twice as long as the rest of the world combined. One of their great competitors, Wales, one of the great rugby nations, hasn't beaten them since the middle of the 1950s. So they're extraordinarily dominant in an extraordinarily competitive environment. And I really wanted to know why. What enables that? And there are clearly a lot of things around it. New Zealand is a small country, but it's not too small. It has a diverse population, which really suits the positional play of rugby. But there must be something else, because that's not really enough. You could say that about Wales, for instance. So what are the beliefs and the behaviors within that environment, within that team, that allows them to continually outperform, to get better every day, if you like? And I was fascinated by the idea of culture and the idea of environment and the idea of winning and sustained success. And I thought it would make a great leadership book, looking at those. There's a lovely Maori quote, the original people of New Zealand, the New Zealand Maori. It just says, gather the good food and cast away the rubbish. And I just wanted to gather the good food that I could from the All Blacks and frame the leadership conversation and the high performance conversation through that prism.
Right. And what makes the All Blacks so successful is this case study that you did about the mantras that they have within the team. And you based your book around the mantras. Could you tell us how many mantras you wrote about?
Well, I wrote about 15. It's about 15. There are 15 people in a rugby team on the field at one time. So my idea was all of these elements combine to create a high performance environment, or their high performance environment. What I wanted to do was try to isolate the key kind of cultural drivers for high performance. So some really, my understanding of culture is that great sustainably successful cultures tend to be clustered around 3 things. They're values based. They have a very strong set of values. They know what they stand for and they know what they don't. They're vision led, what I call vision led. They have a clear idea of what their outcome is, and they're purpose driven. They have a reason to believe. They have a reason to sacrifice. They have clear and compelling purpose. And the All Blacks are a prime example of a values-based, vision-led, purpose-driven culture that achieves extraordinary success. So I thought it was a fantastic case study and something we could all learn from.
So I'm going to have you go into each of the 15 mantras and explain then about each mantra. But before we do, I just wanted to ask you, while writing this book or while doing the case study, did you actually follow the team around or spend time?
Yeah. So I did 2 books with the team. One book called Mana, which I did with a photographer called Nick Danziger. He's an old school photojournalist. So the idea was to capture the All Blacks in black and white, to go inside the team. Mana kind of means the spirit inside, and respect and charisma and presence and God in some ways, in the sort of Pacifica cultures. And so the idea was to go to capture that mana, if you like, the inside story. And that, of course, gave me the familiarity and the relationships and the insight to be able to do it. So I spent about 4 or 5 weeks inside the team and made a number of trips back, kind of interviewing key players, key members of the team, really to get to understand really how they went about their business and what we could learn from it. My undertaking with the team was to I could discuss the cultural side of things, but never give away any rugby secrets. So it's not really a book about sport. It's a book about human beings and teams and how human beings work together best. And I think that's a sort of story for the ages.
Now, during your time with the All Blacks, did you feel that there was something special there? Could you just, every time you were there, was there something that you were like, I can feel why this team is so successful?
Yeah, I think I think it's very difficult when you grow up in New Zealand not to, because these guys are the pantheon. These guys are the gods. And so there's a sort of a sense of intimidation walking into this thing. But I think what was extraordinarily special about it was the welcome I got. Great teams, and this sounds kind of a bit new agey, but great teams really are based on love. A genuine, deep human connection. They're safe spaces for people to express themselves and to flourish. And so I think one of the things this is not just the All Blacks. I've had an opportunity to work with a wide range of exceptional teams. And I think the one defining word, I think, is connection. Highly connected, emotionally intelligent organizations are highly functional. The opposite of dysfunctional, in a way, is to be highly functional. And of course, the thing that most deeply connects human beings is a sense of love and respect and contribution to one another. So I think one of the things, I think, to answer your question, is walking into that environment, is that sense of deep human connection, sort of an informality and an openness, and a humanity, I think. I imagine many of your listeners have spent time with less than elite teams, and often they're the ones where egos run rampant, where factions form, where there's a sort of an edge, and it doesn't feel safe. But we know from a lot of the psychology that psychological safety is one of the key determinants of connection and of contribution, and of individuation, personal growth. And so I think one thing they do very, very well is they create this quite exceptional internal kind of discourse and environment that ticks all of those boxes. And that really helps individuals become part of a team, believe and belong to that team, and align their behaviors in a way that's for the good of the team.
Perfect. Well, I could talk about this, for 2 days. We could dissect this down, but I want to get started on the mantras because they're just, I don't know, each one is as special as the last one. It's really hard to even pick a favorite or which one is more important. So would you please run us through each mantra and just give us an explanation about each one?
Sure. I'm going to have to cheat. I've got my book in front of me, so I'm going to do it. The first one is called Sweep the Sheds, and that was based on the observation in my first sort of entree into the team, that after a test match, and you have to imagine there are tens of thousands of people still hanging around for selfies. There was a helicopter overhead waiting for footage of the team leaving the stadium. But the team themselves, the players led by the senior players, rather than, just grab their bags and head for the bus, head for the coach, took long-handled brooms and started tidying up after themselves. And, on one level, what better metaphor is there for a legacy than leaving the sheds, the locker rooms, in a better state than you found it? But I think it goes even more deeply to that. It was sort of a devotion of sorts. One of the values within this environment, and it's something that you find in special forces as well as in a rugby team, is the idea of humility. Never be too big to do the small stuff that needs to get done. Don't get ahead of yourself. Sweep the sheds. Take care of business. Do the photocopying, make your own coffee, clean up the coffee mugs when they go into the thing. Don't think you're special, because as soon as you start thinking you're special, you're done. And of course, it's the most ancient of the ancients, that idea of hubris, the Achilles heel. As soon as you think you're invulnerable to attack, somebody's going to put an arrow in your heel and you're done. So it's the antidote to the real enemy of high performance, which is entitlement. So that sort of sweep the sheds, pick up the coffee cups, take care of business, do the stuff that needs to be done. No one is bigger than anyone else. Stay humble and stay hungry. Maintain that beginner's mind, so you're not bringing your ego to the table, if you like. I think is a very, very powerful lesson for everybody, not just in sport. It's pretty good in life when the bins have to go out. So that's the first one. The second one is go for the gap. And there's a phrase I use to describe this, which is just when you're on top of your game, change your game. I think one thing in this team, and again, I used it as a case study, so it's not just in terms of this team, is that process of constant reinvention. That as soon as you start falling back on formulas, it's kind of over and out for you. And I think that's true in sport. You get found out pretty quickly. People can watch the video, they can watch the tapes, they can analyze your performance, they can see what you've done. So unless you're making the game, unless you're literally leading the game, you won't be winning it. So that process of reinvention and constant restless discontent, that commitment to get better every day, I think is really fundamental, and is really captured by that. The third is to play with purpose, and we mentioned that a little bit earlier, but to have a big enough why, I think provides a genuine sense of direction and intention for a group of people. When things are tough, you want to know that what you're doing is worthwhile. I mean, we all, in many ways, sacrifice our life to our work. We literally give our life to whatever we choose to do during the day, whether that's rugby or podcasts or writing books or whatever. So making good choices about worthwhile work is tremendously important for human beings. And connecting in a group activity, connecting our own personal purpose, sense of kind of stuff we relate to and meaning to a collective purpose, I think is one of the leaders' most important roles. And particularly, funnily enough, in times of pandemics, where often we're atomized, we're in our kind of home offices a bit more, wondering what it's all about. If you know what it's all about, if you know why what you do matters, that provides a very driven culture. Leaving the jersey in a better place, leaving a legacy, doing what I can with my time in the team. The intrinsic motivation for that is very, very powerful. If you've got something big to play for, you'll play bigger. So I think that's very important. Pass the ball. This takes a phrase from Tom Peters, that leaders don't create followers, they create other leaders. And again, I think that's really how a great team creates a sense of ownership and a sense of development. One of the things that characterized this particular team was it was very much a devolved leadership structure, distributed leadership model, it's sort of technically called, where everybody is expected to sort of step up to the plate. Now, how do you do that? How do you achieve that in a group? Well, you hand over responsibility. It's sort of empowerment, which is a slightly kind of pink and fluffy term in many things, but it really makes a difference when it comes to the crunch, because that sense of personal ownership and therefore commitment, sacrifice, discretionary effort that comes from that is incredibly powerful in a group. And if we take a military example, the military leadership is based really all around the world, is based on an old idea called mission command, or commander's intent, I think in the US it's called, which is the leaders set the vision and the purpose, the end state, and then it's up to the subordinates to figure out the how. And the impact of that is you get better decisions at the front line. You get more engaged human beings, because when you take on responsibility, you take on leadership, you own the result. But also everybody within that group grows into their role. In the military, they call it the strategic corporal. They want thinking soldiers who can be agile and make decisions. So I think that leadership style, which is not command and control, I say jump and you ask how high. It's saying we need to cross that river, guys, figure out how to do it, is a much more powerful way of making the most of your human asset. So that's really what that chapter is about. Within the All Blacks environment, it really was about making the team's team. They even took the pep talk, the coaches talk away, and left that up to the players, so that by the end of a working week, just leading up to the big match, the managers the coaches had done their job. There's not much more they could do. It was up to the team then. And of course, that's a deeply empowered team that is self-leading, and that's very powerful. Part of that, the next idea is about creating a learning environment. Leaders are teachers. And that's really taking that coaching idea and thinking, how can we as leaders, as coaches, but as leaders or as parents, create an environment in which people become the best version of themselves? It's been sort of described as an instrument of inspiration. How can we become that? And of course, what you get is a result, as I sort of talked about in terms of leaders create leaders. You're developing your people to be, to take on more responsibility, put in more effort, and so on. But also, it's about the only way to get better is to get better every day. I mentioned the Navy SEALs before. One of their mantras is about they're looking for expert learners. They want people who are very good learners. That growth mindset that is sort of much discussed at the moment. How can you create an environment that's devoted to improvement rather than falling back into habits or not really addressing the problems? How do you create that? So that chapter really looks at that and their approach to that. I'm going to have to excuse my language here. The next one is no dickheads, a very antipodean approach to it. And that's really just about a team first philosophy. In a good team, there are no stars. There are star performers, but there are no stars. There are no prima donnas. And in fact, prima donnas tend to destroy good teams. The history of team sport is littered by an overdependence on one individual who then starts to become one ego. And what tends to happen, they're really engaged, but everyone else disengages. And so, however, if one person becomes hugely powerful in a group, it disempowers the rest of the group. So lance that boil very quickly, I think. But also what that's about is peer-to-peer reinforcement. You don't want to. You might not worry about letting your coach down as much, but you don't want to let your mates down. Your brothers or your sisters, and if you can create an environment where of equality, if you like, that's very important and very powerful. The SAS, Special Air Service, and other special forces unit, they talk about rank but no class. There's definitely seniority, but there's no difference between human beings. And again, that comes with a humility package in a way, but it's a genuine kind of lateral connection between human beings. And that's, again, very, very powerful and important. And if a team lacks that, that tends to be where teams fall apart. Mm-hmm. Embracing expectations. This is about ambition. And there's a lovely phrase, throw your hat over the wall and then figure out how to get there. Aim for the highest cloud, because even if you come short, you'll hit a lofty mountain. Go hard or go high. I think it's in that chapter I talk about Richie Mccoy, the former captain, and he stated when he was 15 he wanted to become a great All Black. And every day he would write GAB at the top of his sort of notebook and ask, what would a great All Black do? So every day he had to make decisions that lived into that. He won 2 World Cups, played 148 times for his country, a record. By a long way, the most successful All Black of all time and the most successful team of all time. He is the great All Black. And it wouldn't have happened if he hadn't embraced that expectation. And again, in military terms, walk towards the sound of the guns, really make that a thing. Aim high and, aim for the highest mountain and see where you get to. The next chapter is called Train to Win. And this is really about practicing under pressure. Preparation is performance. The way you prepare will be the way you're likely to perform. Any great team, if they're analyzing the game, a loss, say, won't just look at the game. The game is the manifestation of the process that took to get there. And you can either go through the motions, training, preparing, or you can train like it's real. Another military term, train hard, fight easy. Bleed on the training ground, don't die in battle. Exactly the same thing. And psychologically, why that is so important is that it calibrates your resilience to pressure much higher. So if the All Blacks, for instance, they spiked their efforts on a training ground on play on a Saturday. On Thursday, they were playing like it's real. And in football and soccer, it gets called periodization, scenario training that really puts you under genuine pressure. Some teams have done crazy things. They've had the goal kicker lining up and they've literally moved the goalposts, or they get the corner flags moved in to provide more pressure. They mix it up. They substitute somebody off. They put themselves under deliberate pressure so that when the real pressure comes on, they prime themselves, they condition themselves to perform that much better. It's very easy to think, well, it's just a rehearsal. It's just an exercise. We're just going through the motions. But that's not real preparation. You almost have to prepare at a higher degree than you do for game day. And that's very powerful. Keep a blue head. This is... the All Blacks had a terrible habit of losing at World Cups and winning between World Cups. They were world champs between World Cups was the joke. And they were getting a bit of a reputation as sort of chokers. And they really took a long look at it, and they looked at what their response to pressure was and could be. And they defined, a psychologist called Kerry Evans came in and worked with them and defined two kind of states, one called red head, one called blue head. Red head is choking. It's future-based thinking. It's results-based thinking. We got to score. And that's when somebody passes you the ball and you drop it because your mind's not on the game. It's on some imagined future. The opposite of that is blue head, being clear and accurate and on task and in the moment. Roles and responsibilities, just execute the next one. Take it game by game, take it play by play. Come back to the moment. And of course, that's mindfulness in many ways. And so the All Blacks created these kind of anchors, if you like. One player known for kind of getting a bit hot-headed under pressure would throw water on himself to cool himself down. Another player would kind of disengage, so he would stomp the ground to get grounded. Another would kind of go in on himself, so he would look at every corner of the stadium to get the big picture. Very simple metaphors and triggers or anchors that would be a effective kind of state changer for high performance. A lot of the time it's about going from an unresourceful state to a resourceful state. I talked about the SEALs before. They use box breathing as they go into battle. Hold in on 4, hold for 4, out on 4, hold for 4, and slowing and regulating. So a lot of state changing is about self-regulation and being able to come down to an optimum state and able to make good decisions on the paddock under pressure. So they really mastered that. That picked up a couple of World Cups for them. So I think that was the extra 3% that was required at that point. The next really is about sacrifice, which is a word, you hear a lot within that environment. And, the phrase I use is, find something you would die for and give your life to it. We talked about this briefly before. We do give our life to whatever we choose to do. Let's make it worth it. Let's choose worthwhile work. Let's choose a worthwhile purpose. Let's commit ourselves to really making a difference. Altruism has a really selfish purpose in some ways. Going out there to make a difference to other people really helps us lift our own individual game. So what will we give our time for? And how can we do that? Then ritualize to actualize is around creating a culture. It's about creating an environment around ourselves that reflects and reminds and reinforces who we are and what we stand for, what our identity is. Within the All Blacks, the idea of the haka, the ritualized challenge. For those of you who haven't seen a haka, I recommend Googling haka, H-A-K-A, All Blacks, and having a look at it. It's visceral. It's not quite a war dance. It's a challenge, but the team come together, and that's all about connection. It's been connected to the indrawn breath. It's been connected to the ancestors who are buried in the soil. We summon them up to stand beside us. It's been connected to each other. It's been connected to our cause. And that level of kind of creating an environment around ourselves to tell our story to ourselves becomes hugely important. And there's a phrase I like to use, that the story we tell ourselves turns out to be the story that others tell about us. So write that story first. Start to ask yourself some big questions about who we are, what we believe in, why what we do matters. I'm just skimming here to see what I've missed, because I'm sure I've missed something. One of the phrases that isn't here, but I just thought it's worth is champions do extra, which is that law of marginal gains. Don't try to do one thing 100% better. Do 100 things 1% better. Again, kind of my favorite in that it's really practical and applicable. And the San Antonio Spurs in the US have a great phrase. They say, pound the rock. It's not the 100th blow that broke the rock. It was the 99th blows that came before it in the Stonecutter's Creed. So it's that constant application of pressure. The small things make the biggest difference. And then really two chapters that are related to each other. One is be a good ancestor, represent all those who have come before you and all those who will come after. Make your mark in your time with the team. It's not just about you. We're part of a continuum. We're part of a human continuum, and most teams were part of a continuum. What are we going to say about our time in the team? What difference can we make? What contribution can we make? And I think that's a massive and important question, because times change, and in 30 years' time, when you bump into your teammates at an airport, or at a little league game or something, what are you going to talk about? We really went out there and we did it. What contribution can we make to each other? And a lot of the times, as individuals, we don't realize the impact that we have on other people and the people around us. So if we can focus on being a good ancestor at San Antonio Spurs, again, how can I make my teammates better? Is a tremendously powerful way to live, I think, and certainly to operate as part of a team. And then finally, write your legacy. The haka, the chorus of the haka just says, this is your time, this is your moment. And I think it's very easy in life to think that life goes on forever, to think that it doesn't really matter, or we'll get it right next week, or maybe next season will be better. But this moment is the only moment we've really got. And I think an extraordinarily powerful question is to this is our time. This is our team. This is our moment. Let's go out there and seize that moment, embrace that expectation, do what it takes, sacrifice. Muhammad Ali, I think it was, the pain of effort is, I'm paraphrasing, but the pain of effort is much more preferable for the long-term pain of defeat. So what sacrifices, what are we prepared to do now to do that little bit extra to kind of to make it work? And as I say, it's 15 or so individual lessons, but I think they all work together. The idea is they work together, that like any team, like any rugby team, it's a contribution of different elements at different times that creates the overall environment in which excellence can become a habit and winning become almost inevitable.
Yeah. Now, just as you talk about each mantra, I'm just running through the book, page by page, right? And all the different quotes that went with the different mantras. And for me, I actually had to stop and write this one down. Of all the things in the book, and there were a lot of wonderful things, this one is the one that I had to stop, pull over, pull my phone out, get the notes out. And it is, the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. I don't know. That was like...
Yeah, well, that's from Rudyard Kipling. And fascinatingly, Phil Jackson and the Chicago Bulls, arguably one of the other great teams in world sport, it was one of their kind of key ideas. And there's a famous story, I imagine it's sort of apocryphal, of Phil Jackson speaking to Michael Jordan. And Michael Jordan and Jackson already had a number of championship rings. And I think Jordan might have had a couple of MVP kind of awards at that point, but no championship rings. And the conversation went something like, if you can change the me for the we, you can have as many rings as you want. Mm-hmm. And of course, Jordan walks away with 6, and Phil Jackson has, I'm not sure how many, I've lost count, 13. Something like that, maybe more now. I've kind of lost count. There are so many. Yeah. He's got more rings than he has fingers. with that attitude, with that fundamental idea that actually, great teams are a self-reinforcing model of contribution. the more you give, the more you get. And it's a rule of life, really. It's the rule of reciprocity in life, that as soon as you start thinking about what I can get out of a situation, you end up getting less. Anyone who's married probably recognizes that.
Right. And that's what's so great about the book is, yes, it's based around a sports team, but you can take every single one of those mantras and put it into any other type of team, whether it's, your place of work, whether it's your family team or, or a sports team. It just fits everywhere.
And that was very deliberate. And I think I mentioned to you before the broadcast, I was writing this as my second son was born, pretty much, or was, and so there was a lot about family. It's called What the All Blacks Can Teach Us About the Business of Life. So there's business in there, there's sport in there, but it's also, I think, about how, I wanted it to be an exploration around how to live a sustainably successful life, and the quality of our relationships and the quality of our life are very much the same.
Yes.
And I think one of the things around, I've done a mini kind of, values and vision and purpose process with my family, and it's been really extraordinary in the sense. My eldest son came up with the idea of using this surname Kerr: kindness, exploration, responsibility, and respect. The kindness first, exploration, let's go out there and adventure in the world. And responsibility and respect, I think, are two things that belong in pretty much every environment and every team. And that's been really good for us as a group, as a family, because, one of the things that I think happens is that people make a lot of assumptions about the way things should be. And we forget to have those conversations. We forget to get buy-in on a family level or on a team level. And if you can have those conversations about, well, what do we really value? What do we really want? What defines us? Those conversations can really crystallize and simplify a lot of relationships and create much tighter connection and far fewer opportunities for fallout. And that can be very powerful. I've, as I say, I've had the opportunity to work with some quite extraordinary, some special force teams that you'd think are very macho. You'd think they'd be very macho, quite kind of redneck and all of that. But of course, they're based in love. And a lot of the work that I ended up doing in terms of workshops with some of these teams, you end up talking mainly about family. And because that's our primary job as human beings, really, those level of relationships. And I think the principles, it doesn't matter what team it is, the principles remain the same, I think.
I agree. And I think, like, listen, wins or when you accomplish goals, they're just so much more meaningful when there's connection behind it.
Absolutely. And they say, I apologize for using for some reason I've used a lot of military analogies or principles in this, but I'm very interested in the military model because, of course, it's life and death in those situations. And so what works, or what happens, is really what works in those. And in those groups. But, they say, you don't fight for the flag, however much you love your country, you fight for the bloke in the foxhole beside you, the person in the foxhole beside you. It's and if you can create that level of connection when the chips are down, when things are against you, that's when the human connection really matters. I mean, and again, I don't want to sound like a kind of unreconstructed hippie, but there's nothing really stronger in the world than love, than platonic love. We'll talk about, but people run into burning buildings for love. They risk their life. They leave country. They leave jobs. They cross country. There's nothing more powerful. Not even money. Not always, but mostly. It's a fundamental, thing. And so by creating genuine, deep human connection, and that involves being vulnerable, it means being open, it means being honest, it means being authentic. A lot of the themes I talk about in the book, if you can create an environment, it means feeling psychologically safe. If it means feeling cared for, it means being acknowledged, understood, recognized, rewarded, encouraged, inspired. Means being part of a story that's bigger than yourself. All of those things is really what it's about. And so connection, love, bonds, cohesion, all of those kind of words are really all the same, different words for the same thing, which is a group of people kind of with a sense of oneness. Mm-hmm. And I think if you can achieve that in your family, if you can achieve that in your team, if you can achieve that in your business, if you can achieve that in your friendship group, if you can achieve that in society, goodness knows that's probably the most difficult task at the moment. That sense of cohesion and connection, I think, is an unstoppable force. You're still going to be good at your sport and good at your technically good, but it acts as a force multiplier for your intrinsic talent. Bill Walsh once said, if you kind of get that right, the score will take care of itself.
Right.
San Francisco 49ers.
Yes.
The score will take care of itself. So you focus on creating an environment in which all of those characteristics can exist and are encouraged and are accelerated. And you have a very, very strong position to go out and compete in the world.
Right. So to bring this, since this is a fitness podcast,
yes.
and it does go hand in hand with legacy because it is about teams, and there's a lot of teams in the fitness industry.
Sure.
What do you think of all the mantras? Which one do you think really fits the fitness industry? Which one do you think they could use?
Well, the one that occurs to me first up is champions do extra. It's the small stuff that you do, whether that's, I guess, if we're talking about an individual training session, resistance session, it's about form, it's about repetition, mm-hmm. It's about doing that extra set. That's what makes a difference. That extra is really what makes a difference, I think. And so I find that a very practical training base, very applicable on that. I think there's a phrase I use as well, which I think applies to just about everything. If you're not growing anywhere, you're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. One of the things in this is that if you're not, surprising your body, if you're not putting yourself into a zone of discomfort, then if you get too comfortable, if you get too rote about it and routine about it, then that's not going to serve you. It might look like you're going to a training session, but you're not really training. Mm-hmm. And I think that ties in with the sort of, train to win, train hard, fight easy kind of thing. How can you plateau yourself so that you're always taking it to the next level? You're always taking it to the next level. So I think probably in there, they're all related. As I say, they're all related. Mm-hmm. I think probably in there, it's that extra attention, that extra care, that extra devotion. God is in the details kind of approach can be very, very applicable, I think, to just about everything. It's applicable to me as a writer. Just one more draft, or I'll try that sentence one more time, or research this a little bit more. It's applicable to homework for my kids, and it's applicable to doing extra reps in the gym. So I think it has a universal truth that I think is incredibly powerful.
And I'm going to take champions do extra and use that in the fitness arena as well as, even the highest position within the fitness team can certainly pick up towels or clean the locker room or, so as a team, the general manager or the fitness director or the sales director can, pick up trash or
absolutely. And even more important than that, I think, than is that, we lead by example. We are the example we set. The stuff we condone is the stuff that we walk past. And so if you want to lead a great team, do the stuff you expect that team to be doing. Model that behavior. If you can't see it, you can't be it, I think is the cliche. So it's don't be too big to do it, but don't forget just how critical that is as a leader, to be in there in the trenches. Now more than ever, leadership has changed in a lot of ways. It's gone from being kind of follow me to I follow you, if that makes sense. And really, when you look at the psychological dynamics of self-selection for leadership within a group, it will always be the individual. It won't be the flashiest individual or the one who puts themselves forward. It'll be the one who best represents the truest, best values of that group. And we become, as leaders, we become lightning rods for that value, the values that we represent, if you like. So if you're at the top of a pyramid within a fitness center or a fitness group or whatever, and you expect people to be picking up towels, pick up the towels. The best way to get them to do it is not to tell them, it's to show them. And that takes an egoless approach because, sometimes we like to feel that we're bigger and better than that. But that's the death of leadership, really. And I say that's sort of the death of an empathetic human being to an extent. You want to be the person who, a Kipling again can speak with, princes and paupers the same. Where it's an egoless environment and where it's actually just about the difference that you make, the impact that you make, and the contribution that you can make. And that involves, sweeping the sheds and doing extra and kind of getting over yourself, I think. And as soon as you can do that, you can take yourself into a different league, I think. I think the thing that holds most people back is their sense of themselves, and it becomes fixed and it can become arrogant. And I think that's applicable for any team in any industry.
Get your pen ready now for Keep Me's Fit Bizpiration.
What are your 3 tips to begin a self-reflection culture in our business?
Great question. I think the first one is put it in the diary, put time against it. Make it important, because otherwise the urgent will take over. So put it in the diary. Second, lead from the top, but let it be informed from the bottom. Let the ground swell, really understand what's happening on the ground and allow people their voice or encourage the voice, because the benefits of that are huge. And I think the third is follow up. It's all very well to have a great reflective conversation on Monday, but if by Friday it's all been forgotten, then you'll do more damage actually than gains, because people lose faith without a lack of follow-up. So I think that's probably the 3. Get it in the diary, make it important.
Keep Me, smarter member retention. KeepMe.ai.
Now, back to our show. Well, James, thank you so much for coming on to the Fitness Business Podcast. It has been such a pleasure and an honor to have you on as a guest.
Listen, it's both a pleasure and an honor for me too. It's great to kind of, I get passionate about this stuff, as you might have noticed. I think, my purpose is about trying to kind of create a better world of work for people, if you like, a better environment for people to work in and to flourish. And so it's a real honor to have an opportunity to speak to your audience and to you. I've really enjoyed the conversation, so thank you.
James, I can't thank you enough for sharing your time with our Fitness Business Podcast family. It was certainly a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you again. It is now time to hear from one of our sponsors, Raw Athletics.
Did you know that the active ingredient in most disinfecting wipes has well-documented lung, skin, and reproductive health concerns? That active ingredient is called a quaternary ammonium compound, or a quat, not necessarily something you'd want in a health and wellness facility. VaporFresh disinfecting gym wipes avoid all quats and instead use an innovative citric acid chemistry to disinfect. Even with this greener chemistry, VaporFresh is still EPA registered to disinfect 99.9% of surfaces. VaporFresh is trusted by some of the most premier gyms and college rec centers nationwide. With 1,200 wipes per roll and 4 rolls per case, they offer an unbeatable value per wipe. Order today at vaporfresh.com or Amazon.
Quickfire 5.
Quickfire 5 is up next, and this week's guest is Crystal Reynolds. She is the owner and operator of 43 Degrees North Athletic Club in New Hampshire. Crystal Reynolds, welcome to the Quickfire 5 questions. Now listen, I expect nothing less than pure fun and entertainment from your answers today.
All right, I'm ready, Dory. I'm ready.
All right, question number 1. What was a business or life lesson that you learned from one of the jobs you did when you were younger?
I would definitely have to say that is time management. I was fortunate enough to work at TJ Maxx. I don't know if they have that where you live, but I spent lots of my time in the fitting room putting things back on hangers. And then it would suddenly be time to close. And I had, theoretically spent my paycheck already shopping in the fitting room. So I had to learn how to get all that done so I could actually clock out on time.
All right. Gotta love me some TJ Maxx. Question number 2. If you were not doing what you are doing now, what would you be doing?
I think I would want to be a tour guide that maybe took people hiking or whitewater rafting or something outdoors. I think that would be fun.
That would be super fun. I'll be a part of your tour. All right, Crystal, when you write an autobiography, what's the title going to be?
Oh, man. It might have to be something like Confessions from maybe a sugar addicted fitness professional or something, because I basically got the antithesis going here.
All right. And number 4, what is one book that you could recommend to all of our Fitness Business Podcast listeners out there?
Okay, so I'm going to nerd out on you, but I'm definitely going to say the dictionary. So I remember having the actual big, thick Webster's dictionary, and it had the answer to every question I ever had for Google. So I think everybody should have a good old-fashioned dictionary.
All right. Awesome. Mr. Webster. Yes. Yes to Mr. Webster. All right. And finally, Crystal, next week, you're going to be our industry expert. So I need you to give me your best elevator pitch to our FBP family out there listening on why they should come back next week for your episode.
All right, guys. Next week, it's going to be epic. This applies to any size club, no matter what it is that you do there, any role. I'm going to give you a bunch of inexpensive solutions to very expensive problems that will work for any type of club and community. So come back next week and hear what we have to say.
Head on over to our show notes at fitnessbusinesspodcast.com to learn more about James Kerr and to purchase his book on Amazon. Next up, a message from our founding partner, Active Management.
Hi, FBP family. It's JT from Active Management, the founding partner of the Fitness Business Podcast. Thanks to the amazing technology at our fingertips, we can now work with clients all over the world. But right now, you can join the free online Active Management Facebook community. It's an amazing group of people just like you. Sure, I share weekly resources, but it's the power of the community that you will experience that will make this your go-to Facebook group. Remember, it's free, fun, and inspirational. Go to facebook.com/groups/Active Management Community.
What you leave behind is not what's engraved in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others.